I know you're thinking it's quite arrogant to quote yourself, but yeah, there you go, I quoted me. Okay, let me start with some Oliver Stone. 1987, Wall Street. Gordon Gekko famously said that greed is good. Those words were intended by Oliver Stone, the man who wrote them, to be a cynical commentary on what he perceived to be the financial immorality within our Western society. And so as he developed the character of Gordon Gekko, who spoke them, he did so assuming that his audience would dislike the character. He assumed that when they were introduced to a man whose greed caused him to put the economics of a deal before the ethics of a deal, he assumed that when they saw a man whose income was more important to him than character, whose cash flow was more important than integrity, that they would dislike him. However, much to Oliver Stone's surprise, cinema-going audiences in 1987 loved the character of Gordon Gekko. And in survey after survey, people said that of all the characters in the film, the one they most admired, the one they most wished to be like, was this nasty sleazebag, because they resonated with his worldview. Being, greed is good. Greed is right. Greed seems to make sense. Greed seems to work. And back in 1987, I, as you know, come from Britain. I'm a child of Margaret Thatcher. Unusually for someone in Scotland of my generation, I actually liked Margaret Thatcher, so that's where I'm coming from. I actually went out one Halloween dressed as Margaret Thatcher. That's a whole other... Yeah. You might draw a connection between that and something I'll say in 2 minutes. Please don't. So I kind of agreed with that. I was one of those people. I think from an economic point of view that greed is good. I think from a certain point of view greed is right. I think from a certain point of view greed does work. And whether you agree with that or not is irrelevant, because that is the philosophy upon which our Western society is built. So in 1776, a man called Adam Smith wrote a thesis called The Wealth of Nations. Adam Smith was Scottish, coincidentally. This is another one of those things where I tell you how Scotland invented the modern world. You're welcome. So in his thesis, Smith persuasively argued that the future of the world economy should be entrusted entirely to individual human greed. His point in crude terms was that your hairdresser does not provide you with good service at a reasonable price for altruistic reasons. Rather, your hairdresser provides you with good service at a reasonable price so that you'll keep going back to her salon and not anyone else's and give her more money. Therefore, Smith would argue that your hairdresser's desire to make more money drives her to provide good service at a competitive price, and that makes the world tick. And over the past 250 years or so, that thesis has been the accepted logic of the global economy, which leaves us as Christians in a little bit of a pickle, because the Bible takes an astonishingly hard line against greed. There are more warnings in the Bible against greed than pretty much all the other vices combined. For example, if an openly homosexual person decided to join our church, we might feel a little uncomfortable with that. And our discomfort would not be unreasonable, because there are, after all, depending how you count them, 4 or 5 verses in the Bible that take a hard line against homosexual behavior, right? None of them are in the Gospels. 3 of them are in the Torah. 2 of them are in the letters of Paul. So, but that's fair enough. That would give us legitimate cause for discomfort. However, if another fella came to our church and he was just all about money, money was what made him tick, he was, he obsessed about it, he lived for it, he was greedy by any definition of the word, we would find no discrepancy whatsoever between his chosen lifestyle and our Christian faith. And yet there are, depending on how you count them, around about 800 verses in the Bible that speak out quite forcefully against greed. Many of them in the Gospels, many of them in the letters of St. Paul. And this morning we're going to look at one of them. So this is a big, serious Bible subject. In the Gospel according to St. Luke, Jesus tells this story. And the context behind the story is that there's a guy who's in the middle of a heated argument with his brother about money. So this is awesome. There's no fights quite like money fights, and there's no family fights quite like money fights. So what's going on here? He says, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Now, in our culture, when our parents die, their estate is usually divided between the children, and each child is then free to take their share of the money and go and do whatever they want with it. The practice in Bible times, however, was a little more complex, because the estate, often consisting entirely of land, would be divided up between the children, who would then use that land collectively to provide a joint family income for the entire extended family, in much the same way that the owner of a business today might leave that business to his or her children, who will then use that business to collectively make an income for their respective families. So that's what's going on here. The man in the crowd has, as it were, been left a share of the family business, but he wants out. He wants to cash in and go and do his own thing. Don't know why, but I'm going to guess. He probably wants to start a business of his own. He's probably been planning it. He's probably been dreaming it into existence. All he needs now is a little bit of capital so he can go on, be independent of his brother, remove himself from whatever family dramas exist. And I'm guessing there's a lot of family dramas. He just wants out. So he says, Jesus, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Tell my brother to divvy up. Now, if I were Jesus in this story, I would not touch this dispute with a 10-foot barge pole. Two brothers fighting about an inheritance, nah. Not getting involved, go see a lawyer. However, something about this particular guy, either in what he said or the way that he said it, raises a big red flag for Jesus. So rather than answering the question directly, Jesus turns to everyone else in the crowd and says, guys, I want you to watch out. I want you to be on your guard against all kinds of greed. And then look at what Jesus says. He says, for a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And the irony there, of course, is that the man who asked Jesus to get involved in this financial dispute was watching out. That's all he was doing. He was very much on his guard. The hairs on his neck and his hackles were up all the time about this issue. He was on his guard against getting ripped off by his brother. He was watching out that his brother didn't spoil his prospective business venture that he wanted to establish. There are few issues in life that will make you sit up and pay attention and watch out quite so effectively as money. We are on our guard all the time when it comes to this stuff. And yet Jesus says, typical Jesus, yeah, I want you to watch out. And I want you to be on your guard. But not against getting ripped off. Not against not getting your share. But against greed. Against thinking that somehow your life is the same as your stuff. The word greed, in the dictionary anyway, means an excessive desire for money. And that desire, as you all know, is characterized by a discontentment, by that silly, stupid, destabilizing feeling that happiness can never be experienced in the present, but only in the future. And that the getting of that happiness is directly connected to the getting of just a little bit more. You and I all operate in a never enough culture in which the dogma of having more will make you happy is preached with an evangelical zeal and believed with an unthinking stupidity. And therefore, Jesus' words in this sentence rub against the grain of one of our most deeply held assumptions. I mean, we live in the GTA. It's not easy living here. It's expensive living here. And so we work as hard as we can to make as much as we can. We have to. But we operate under the unquestioned assumption that our life and our stuff are somehow connected. And therefore, regarding our stuff, we are very much, to borrow the words of Jesus in this sentence, watching out. We are very much on our guard. We will not be ripped off. We will not lose our share. We will not be taken a loan of. And so as 21st century followers of Jesus, this stuff gives us a problem because, we're not 4th century monks living in the desert content with a piece of bread and water. We got cell phones that keep beeping and need to be paid. We got families to provide for. We got university to pay for. We've got mortgages. We've got cars. We've got all that stuff, and it's all so very expensive. So what do we make of this? We who draw such connection between life and stuff. In the next sentence, Jesus tells a rather pointed story. He says, the ground of a certain... By the way, as I mentioned last week, Jesus told about 35 or 36 stories in the Gospels, and about half of them are about money and stuff. He spoke about this all the time. He said, the ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. That's nice. So he thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. So what we're talking about here is a businessman who had a bumper year in which his fortunes are increased beyond his expectations, so much so that he has insufficient storage for his increased good fortune. So just to clarify, we're talking about a rich man who gets unexpectedly richer. This, in our parlance, would be like Jeff Bezos winning the lottery. Right? No, even more than that. This would be like Jeff Bezos finding out that Bill Gates died and left him everything in his will. Right? So he's got this problem. Oh no! What am I going to do with all my extra money? I was already loaded, now I'm super loaded. Now, poor me, I've got to sit down and figure out what I'm going to do with all my extra money. Can we throw a pity party for me, please? So, and as the story goes on, I'm pretty disappointed. Because having sat down and thought about what he wants to do with all of his money, he decides to do something sensible. I think this is why money's wasted on the rich, by the way. There's no exotic round-the-world trips. There's no buying the Degas he always fancied. There's no purchasing that Aston Martin DB9. Look at what Jesus says. He says, I've sat down and I've figured out what I'm going to do with all my extra money. I'm going to tear down my barns and build bigger barns. Ooh, easy there. And then I'll say to myself, you've got plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink. and be merry. I think that's fair enough. Mr. Businessman has done his business. He's correctly assumed that having earned all this money, he should then be careful with his money, so that when he's older, his money will take care of him. And he's set up pretty sweet. My favourite word in that sentence? Many. Many years. I'm going to eat, and I'm going to drink, and I'm going to be merry for many years. Sounds good to me. So this guy in this story at this point has done what we would all wish to do. He has played the game of life, and he has won. And the prizes are now his to enjoy. I'm thinking beach, drinking stuff out of a coconut for the rest of my life. Sounds alright. However, as he contemplates the rest of his life, God informs him he has no life left. Next sentence. God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Who then will get what you have prepared for yourself?" Now, I've read this sentence. I've been reading this sentence professionally for 22, 23 years. And the older I get, the less I like it. When my kids were younger, I used to play board games with them. And I liked Monopoly because... And even when I'm playing with my kids, I play to win, you know what I mean? But Monopoly lies to you. Monopoly tells you that at the end, the person with all the houses and all the hotels and all the money wins. And then the game is over. But that's not how life is. The game is over when all the bits go back in the box. Right? That's when the game's really over. I actually thought of Monopoly there because I was cleaning this week. And I used to cheat a little. And under my kitchen table just this week, I found a whole stack of hundreds on a little ledge. Yeah, that was a learning opportunity for my kids. Anyway, so what this sentence says to me, now that I'm in my 40s, is this sentence talks to me about the silliness of assumptions. We all assume stuff. We assume that we have a future. Maybe we don't. We assume that we're going to be healthy. That we're going to have all our teeth and all our limbs. And be able to do things. Maybe we won't. We assume that how things are now are the way they'll be then. Maybe they won't. We assume the family will be fine. Maybe it won't. Every single time we think about the future, we do so with assumptions. And we know enough about life to pause on that and think, maybe not. Look at the words that come out of Jesus' mouth here. Be on your guard against thinking that your life consists in the abundance of your possessions. He who dies with the most toys doesn't win. He still dies. And yet, I find irony in what Jesus says here. Who will get what you've stored up for yourself? Well, isn't that how it works for everyone? I mean, when you die, they don't bury the money with you. Someone else always gets it. That's how it is for everyone. That's how it is in 100% of cases. The money just stays around. The stuff stays around. It's not always yours. It's not always ours. It is more loosely connected to us than we have been led to believe. Then Jesus says, this is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich towards God. That's Jesus' way of saying, it all ends for everyone, and there's something else. And that's all well and good. It is. It really is. I get it. But I keep coming back as a 21st century Toronto liver to the practical issues. What about the bills? What about our needs? We've got mouths to feed and stuff to take care of. You can't call your bank manager at the end of the month when the mortgage doesn't go through and say, I don't get any money, but Jesus said life doesn't consist in the abundance of our possessions, so we're good, yeah? It doesn't work that way. Last week we said that according to all the research, we need about $120,000 Canadian to just get by in this culture, household income. Hard to disagree with that. What about that? How do we marry these 2,000-year-old sayings to 21st century life? In the next sentence, Jesus gives a rare piece of financial advice, and I love it. Jesus said to his disciples, therefore, based on what I've just told you, do not worry about your life, about what you'll eat, about your body, what you'll wear. Life is more than food. The body is more than clothes. Now, it seems to me that your life is the only thing you would worry about. And when Jesus uses the word life in verse 22, he's referring to the basic stuff you need to get by in this world. You need to go shopping for groceries later. How are you going to pay for it? You just got a hydro bill. How are you going to make that work? In a few years' time, your children are going to be, perhaps applying for places at university. How are you going to make that work? I mean, think for a moment about all the many things that you have to be worried about. In this sentence, Jesus says there is so much more to your life than the sum total of your fears and your anxieties and the stuff that keeps you up at night. Your life is more than the stuff you're worried about. And Jesus hammers home the point. He says, consider the ravens. They don't reap, they don't have storerooms or barns, yet God feeds them, and you're more important than they are. This is lost on us because we're not first century Jews, but for a first century Jew, a raven was like a rat. It was a nothing. It was a thing you stood on. It was ugly. It was detestable. Yet Jesus looks at them and says, it seems to work out for them. Somehow they seem to make it work. Maybe you will too. Maybe it'll all be okay. Then Jesus asks a pertinent question. And again, this is financial advice. He's talking about money here. Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? You don't even need to think about that for a second, do you? You can worry about money all day long. It won't make you live a day longer, and it won't make you an ounce happier. It might kill you a day sooner, though. Right? It might make you a couple of ounces unhappier. Then Jesus says, I hate when Jesus says things like this. He says, consider how the lilies grow. That's just what you need when you're stressed about money, isn't it? Consider the lilies. All right, okay. They don't labor or spin, yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you? And then the kicker, O you of little faith. This is the issue. You are a Christian. As such, you believe certain things about God. You believe that he loves you. You believe that he knows what you're going through. You believe he is aware of what your needs are. Would it kill you to trust him? Would your life not be a wee bit better if instead of spending 5 hours a day stressed out and anxious about how you're going to make it work, you instead spent 5 minutes a day saying, I just trust it'll work out. And in that trust, I'll just get on with it. Would that not be more productive? Would that not contribute to more happiness and to less stress? Just trust that things will work out. They do anyway. He says, do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Everyone else runs after these things, and your Father knows you need them. But seek first his kingdom, and these things will be given you as well. Again, in this sentence, in using the word Father, he's asking us to get it into our thick, anxious noggins that God is fully aware of what we need and what we're going through. And it'll be okay. That's the subtext of all of Jesus' financial advice. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. It'll work out. You're just wasting your time worrying. You're just spoiling today, worrying. You're just putting yourself in an early grave, getting stressed out. Just put one foot in front of the other. Do what you got to do and it'll be okay. Just will. Will you get a coconut on a beach for the rest of your life? Probably not. I've been on a beach drinking stuff out of coconuts. It gets old anyway. Couple of days, you're done. It's boring. Last sentence, to drive home the point even further. Do not be afraid, little flock. Your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Big picture theology of the New Testament. With what attitude does God welcome people like you and me? It's with open arms, right? With generosity, with kindness, with grace, with love. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. So when we read bits like this in the Bible, we're confronted with two indisputable facts. Fact number one, we live in a culture that places great value on possessions and on financial security. And we've bought into that along with everyone else. And we kind of have to a little bit. Like I said, it's expensive and our bills are our responsibility. So that's just a brute fact. And yet as Christians there is this other voice, this alternative thing in our heads that comes from the pages of the Bible that warns us very clearly of the dangers of living too much for possessions and security and stuff. And that is the tension that we live with, and that's the fine line we need to walk. All of that, few words. You know what you people need to realize? It'll be okay. You'll be okay. You'll be okay. So don't worry. Just be happy. For goodness sake, don't put happiness off to tomorrow, because you don't know you've got one. Happiness is today. It's around your kitchen table with the people you love. It's today. Enjoy it. Make the most of it. It's a gift. God bless you. See you next Sunday.